Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight for Inspiring Capital's MBA Fellowship. And what we're going to be talking about is starting with me, this idea of personal leadership, growth, and development as a path to a purposeful career as an MBA student in the world. So I'm Nell Derek Debevoise. I'm the founder and CEO of Inspiring Capital. Love this topic, love the MBA Fellowship, and really excited to be here, particularly with one of our oldest gangsterist alums, Juanita Milano Parra, who was a fellow in our very first MBA Fellowship back in 2014. So hey, Juanita, it's good to be with you. Say a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, hi, it's so nice to be here. It's been interesting because the more people I talk about AC or just any alum, I really have that badge of honor of having been part of the first fellowship.
Totally.
So yeah, thank you for that introduction. So yeah, my name is Juanita Milano Parra. I am originally from Colombia. My journey here, I live in Indianapolis now. My journey here, I say, is MBA engineer turned life and leadership coach. And so that's a bunch of things that you can imagine happen in between. But what I would like for all of you to what I'd like to share about all of that is I really started my career in Colombia. So I was born and raised there. I've lived there. I can still say I lived there most of my life. And I did everything right. I did all the right steps. I was really good in school. I went to industrial engineering, got all the good grades, started at a good company, started working in finance, did all I needed to do to get into a good MBA program, moved to the US because that was what you were supposed to do. Go to the US, get the MBA, do the thing. Went to NYU. That's how I ended up in the US in the first place. And in the summer of my MBA was when I did Inspiring Capital. And so at that point, I'm going to say I was in this weird place where I had done all these things for my MBA. And so I found myself at the MBA where I was like, okay, what next? Because I did everything to get here, but I never actually thought about what would come after. I mean, I thought about it in paper. We all did. We wrote essays and we said the things we were going to create, but I didn't actually believe I would create those things. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that, right? Because a lot of my classmates, a lot of my friends during school, we all came with this ideas, these things we wrote about. And so there was so much talk about social enterprise and starting your own companies and doing your own thing and following your dreams and da-da-da-da-da. But as we all graduated, so this is a year after Inspiring Capital, most of us ended up in the traditional paths, in banking, in consulting, in the corporate world, for a million reasons, mostly driven by circumstances. My circumstance was immigration. So I was an international student. I wanted to stay in the US, and so I kept working in corporate finance. And so I'll tell you more, and we'll talk more about how Inspiring Capital fit in that whole story and what I got from it. But in that piece, it was kind of like this little, this little parenthesis in my career, and then I kept doing the right thing, right? And so I did corporate finance for another probably 3 years. And at some point down that path, there was a set of circumstances where my company got shut down. I moved from New York to Indianapolis. Some people from my past reached out to me, and this all triggered some seeds that had been planted around coaching. And so for me, coaching was in the realm of talking to people, supporting people in figuring out what they want. This coming in my stories around women in business and breaking the glass ceiling. And as I rise through the ladder, finance, bringing women along. So let's do that. And so I started a pretty rigorous coaching training program. And my idea was that I was going to bring that with me into the corporate world. I started getting coached. I actually had never worked with a coach before, which seems kind of crazy, but I didn't. I started coaching. I actually got the chance to coach Inspiring Capital Fellows that summer, which was an amazing experience. And as months went by, it went from, this is pretty awesome, to this is pretty awesome. I think this is what I want to do for a living, to this is pretty awesome, this is what I want to do for a living now. And so I did both finance and coaching for a few months, and at the end just decided that coaching was the way that I wanted to have an impact and was where I wanted to actually work in the future, and the future was right now. And it's been about a little over 2 years since I made that choice, and since then I've been full-time coaching. I work with individuals, I work with groups, I still work with Accomplishment Coaching, which is the organization I trained with, training new coaches, and me still receiving a lot of leadership and coaching training, which has been really interesting, an entirely different way of leadership than what I'm going to say I grew up with in the corporate world. So in a nutshell, that's my story.
And it's a beautiful one. It's your story so far. Lots more of the story.
So far, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Anita. So that's kind of the background of what we wanted to hear for you all to hear. So again, you'll get to hear about Juanita's journey as an IC fellow and now as a leadership coach, as well as not only an MBA student but a corporate finance veteran. And so we're going to dig more into this kind of personal development, personal leadership, and how that is absolutely foundational to corporate success or just life success as an MBA, whether that is in corporate for the short term, for the long term, or in other places, and really being those fire belly agents of change that we see the Inspiring Capital Fellows to be. Because we always do, and because of the topic, before we dive into all the rest of that, I'm actually going to just ground us for a minute and ask you all to join me. Yes, even if you're watching the recording after the fact, I ask you to follow right along. Do not forward the 60 seconds. That's an order, an invitation, a strong invitation. But knowing that your days are what they are as MBA students and as all of us as humans. Some people will be watching this pre-election, some people will be watching post. Hopefully we're all still okay. I don't know. But so just let's get grounded together for a minute. So get your feet solidly on the ground if they're not. Do a little shoulder shake, because I'm sure you've had some reasons to hold your shoulders up by your ears already today or this week or this year or this life. So shake it out a little bit, get settled well in your seat. Feel that ground under your feet, under your tush, under the chair on which you're sitting. Start to breathe a little more deeply than you probably have been. And then if you're comfortable, avert or go ahead and just close your eyes. It won't be painful, I promise. And just keep those deep breaths. If it's helpful to put a hand on your belly to encourage the air all the way down into your system, please do that. And then super simple today, I want you to think of one word that describes you and your fabulousness. And that could be funny, it could be strong, it could be hardworking, it could be resilient or patient or loving or funny or beautiful, whatever resonates as one word representing that awesomeness that you are. No judgment. I know it's easy to cast doubt or to be ashamed of pride, but just safe space in your own little head, pick that one word. And just hold that word with one breath. If there's an image for you, great. If it has a color or an object or a place in the world that connects to that word, hold that strongly in mind. And we're just going to breathe into it for 4 or 5 breaths. Take one more breath, holding that word, that fabulous piece of you. And then as you're ready, come back. Cool. Thanks. So on that note, my next question to you, Juanita, a lot of folks who come to us, especially these days, right? More and more folks have some kind of a mindfulness practice or have done some self-leadership or think about their diet or their exercise or meditation, right? That's getting more and more mainstream, even among type A MBAs. And a lot of folks who end up in our fellowship have not necessarily done a lot of that. And we're very forward about offering it. That's been true from day one. And so Juanita, tell us a little bit about that. How much personal development work on any of these themes of self-awareness or mindfulness or, purpose development, wherever it might go, before coming to IC? How comfortable were you with that?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that. So the work that I had done before, by the time that I got to IC, I had been working with a person that she was kind of a therapist, kind of a guide, I'm going to say. And I had been working with her for about 3 years. And so I had already started a lot of work on myself, but it was very much from more of a therapeutic standpoint. And so taking a look at myself, just like really healing wounds, a lot of that. And a lot of the guide had been more, the way that I think about it now, it's kind of like I had been, like when you read books around self-development or anything like that, you read it and it's like a really good book and you're like, oh my God, this is so interesting. Yes, I'm going to start doing this. Yes, yes, yes. And then you close it and then you put it away and then life goes on and you forget you ever read it. So it was kind of like that, where I actually was almost literally doing that, reading a lot of books. I was receiving a lot of information, receiving a lot of guidance. And so I feel like I was comfortable with that piece of like the receiving it, the actual practicing of it, and the actual, I want to say, understanding of the intention behind all those things, not so much. And so that's something that I like to talk about a lot, or just like for people to know a lot, because I'm going to tell you that half the people that I talk with when it comes to coaching, everybody thinks they need to meditate. So everyone's like, I'm so terrible, I procrastinate everything, I don't follow my goals, I need to meditate. I'm like, great. What for? Well, because one needs to meditate and eat well. And so I think there's this connection with, there's so many things out there. There's so many books to read. There's so many things you should do. There's so much around well-being. I think it's taking a step back. And I think whether it's around mindfulness or career or anything else, that was what I see was a lot for me. It was like taking a step back of, okay, what is this for? Meditate. Okay, what for? So right now, meditation for me is a way to calm my mind. And when I'm working with someone, I need to be very present and in my body and outside of my head, because from being inside of my head, I cannot really be with that person. So, okay, I get it. That's what it's for. That's the purpose of the practice. Let's do that. But without that, it's like just kind of like a stick. Anything that involves personal development, mindfulness, anything like that can become a stick to beat yourself up with. Right? It's like, you need to meditate, you need to breathe, you need to eat healthy. Okay, sure, this doesn't sound like personal development is something I want to do then. And so, I don't know, I think all of this to say, like, I had done some work. I had especially heard, read, received a lot of guidance. I hadn't practiced as much before IC, and I think it gave me a lot of, okay, what's the intention, what for, purpose. I think that's a word that we use a lot in Inspiring Capital. So, yeah, I think that's where it all came.
Awesome. Thank you. That makes, I'm glad to hear. It's always reassuring when our intent comes through. But and obviously we've talked over the years about that, so I think that's true. But we were really, it's funny, just coming off this retreat, we were talking about that of, again, 8 years later, or 7 years from 2014 when you were with us, the self-care thing has really exploded, right? And so the fact that everyone's saying they need to meditate is new and different, and it's great. I think it's very valuable to meditate, but we were talking about the exact same point that so we talk about this relationship between impact and meaning and purpose, right? And so purpose is this kind of lofty, like almost by definition, broad, maybe a little bit vague, but lofty statement, right? That you're working toward over your career, through your life, whatever it might be. And then impact is very tangible, and it's the carbon output of our day, and it's very tactical and measurable, gosh darn it, which are both really important, right? But I think what's super interesting, and what we work a lot on building the habit or the practice of at Inspiring Capital, is the meaning making between those things, right? And so in the article that I wrote about that to kind of help spread this idea to the world, I use the example of making a healthy breakfast or going to the gym. And so like meditating, going to the gym is a good thing, right? Like very few people would argue, don't be active. Like it's a good thing to somehow get active. It's maybe not at the gym anymore because COVID, but to somehow be active, right? And so that's all good. But what I talked about was this example of a friend who had, was probably 30, maybe plus a little more pounds overweight, was in his 50s, getting up to an age where that was concerning. And so everyone, his kids who I know and wife who I know and family were like, you gotta get active. You've got to do something to drop this weight, or at least get your heart in gear, right? Forget about, it's not about the beach 6-pack. It's just to get your heart in gear. You got to work out. And he's like, I know, but they could never get him there. Right. And so sure enough, he has a grandchild, right? He's in his late 50s, has a grandchild, and boom, the next day he's at the gym. And you can't get the guy out of the gym 6 days a week, right? Sundays off. And so all of a sudden there's this purpose, there's this higher calling, right? It's a kid, it's a baby that he wants to be around for, to run and play and lift and carry and see grow up. And the gym is easy. The impact is easy. It just comes. Right. And that was always true. Like that hypothesis of living longer didn't appear the day his grandchild was born, but he hadn't been able to do the process of making meaning between the impact of, it wasn't about the 6-pack abs. It wasn't about meeting people socially in a workout. It wasn't about relieving stress. It wasn't, which are all really good reasons also to get exercise. For him, it was about living to see his family and see his family grow and be there. Right. And because of this physical child, he was able to make meaning, but we practice a lot that meaning making because it's a pain to do a lot of this extra work. Life is already hard and busy. I have other shit to do than meditate. But I know that if I want to get done what I want to get done, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, which happens to include a lot of self-leadership and self-growth and mindfulness.
Yeah, I love that example, Nell. And I think, often with clients, I use those examples of losing weight because it does require work. And losing weight for the sake of losing weight is not going to happen, or at least not going to happen sustainably. And so it's this thing where I think thinking about goals, thinking about success, whether it's in anything personally, anything in terms of well-being, which is kind of what we were talking about, but also in terms of relationships, in terms of career, in terms of any of that, it's kind of like the higher the goal, the more intense the goal, the higher you aim, there's going to be more challenges. And to go past those challenges, to actually stay committed, you really need a big meaning. You need, I talk about a big what for. And so I think that's where a lot of that personal development or that inner inquiry comes in, where it's what for success? What is success for me? Why does this matter for me? And in the world of impact and any other world, right? Because I want to get into social enterprise because I want to do good. Okay, but what else, right? And like, what does that mean to you? And making all of those connections, because I think when I think back at my MBA years, for a lot of us, those were the connections that were missing. Because we all wanted to do those things, but the circumstances were intense. And not even COVID related, but just the life circumstances were big, right? Like loans are super real. Immigration is super real. There's all these things that are very real. And I do think there is a way around it if you have a big enough what for to make you think of all other possibilities and getting the support and all of the things, right? So this is super real. Circumstances, yes, they're there. Possibilities, you can see them when you're really invested, when this really is like, this is what I want to make because this is what matters to me.
Yeah, exactly right. It's so well put. So as you said, IC was a little bit of a moment in, in between, nestled in between finance before and after, and engineering before that. So how did you build this stuff, this personal development, into that time of your life before you made this big transition? Were there people who helped you, or tools, or, how did you continue doing that work?
So throughout that time, I kept working with this guide, therapist person, and so that kept supporting me. I kept reading a lot, so I think a lot of, I would say, like self-development books. And it's interesting because now that I say it, it's just, it's like, I don't know, it kind of feels okay. But I remember at that time, I was moving, I was packing, and a friend was helping me pack, and she was packing all my books, and she kind of gave me this look of like, I don't know, the way I felt, it was almost like, what's wrong with you that you need all of it?
Are you okay? There's something I should
know.
Yeah.
It was basically that. And it really hit me, just like, I had that to be normal. My siblings have similar libraries, so like, it's fine. But it just struck me that it was actually something different that I was doing. Not everybody engaged in the same level of inner inquiry or self-development. Like there was all this kind of taboo about the self-development section of the library. I'm like, that's where I spend most of my time, Like, it's just, so I did a lot of that. So for me, it was, again, like just a lot of, I'm going to say consuming, receiving. How much of it applied? I'm going to say a fair amount, not half as much as I do now. So I think like that's what's been very different now, is just like taking it from the theory and what I'm reading to actually focusing a lot more on the practice. So now, for example, like it's almost like my personal rule now. I'm not allowed. I don't allow myself to read another like development, leadership, anything book if I haven't actually taken the step of the last one I read. Because I'm so full of information that it actually can become a little overwhelming. Like there is such thing as overaware. So yeah, just I think that in terms of people, I think there was this guide. Now I have a coach, I have a therapist, I have spiritual healer. Like I have different realms of support. And I don't think there is such thing as over support. And we all think there is. I mean, I may be kind of lying. Sometimes I think there's such thing as over support, especially when I'm the one needing it, but there really isn't. And so when I think, again, my coach, my therapist, different networks that I have, different groups of friends, those are all support structures of personal development.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And where, obviously we reached out and wanted to have you have this conversation because of your level of awareness and interest and work on it that you've been doing over the years before and after IC. And for everyone watching, that is not the uniform case among IC fellows, right? There's a range in our folks. I mean, everyone is by definition, I would say, a seeker, right? There is that level of ambition and, again, purpose of not only wanting to leave the world better than I found it, but really wanting to drill down on that and spend the time and do the work, which is not easy or always joyful or free or well paid, to get to what that means for me in this chapter and in this life. But there's a range of how people do that or approach that. So just speak a little bit about, either within your cohort of the 2014 OG class or, those other fellows you've worked with over the years. Like, how do you see that kind of range of attention or investment in this world of personal development?
That's a good question. I think it really varies like across the board, because I think that was something really interesting about Inspiring Capital when I was there, but also as I've seen the classes go through, where people really are at across like different places in their personal development journey. They end up in different places in their impact journeys. So yeah, I don't know if I would put them all in one, like. Yeah, I think they really are across the board, which I think is a good thing, because it really speaks to there's something about Inspiring Capital, and I think I talked about that a lot when I talk to people that are thinking about joining or that are going through the fellowship. That is, there's a lot of choice. So I know this wasn't your question exactly, but I think like part of it is just like there are all these things available, and it's almost like a buffet, right? Like, so you kind of come in and you really can make, in a way, you can make your own program. So some people, and I think I was one of them, like may have taken more of the personal development, may have taken more advantage of a lot of the guidance. So like I took a lot, like for me, the guidance in terms of career as I went into my second year and during my second year was crucial. So I put, I think, a lot of my energy in there. But then there's also, okay, like just support for the consulting project and the actual, I'm going to say like more businessy strategy work. And so there's that. And it can be all this to say, I think there is rich enough menu so that you really can take what you need in the moment. And the beauty of the network that is created as these years go by is that you can always go back to, right? Like this conversation we're having right now is something that can also be listened to and leveraged by people that have already gone through IC. I keep talking about AC, the company I work with now, and IC, Inspiring, and I just get confused, sorry. But Inspiring Capital, right? Like just like getting the juice when you're in it or once you graduate, which I think is,
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's very representative of what we try to do, which is, kind of present the options, state very clearly our point of view, which is that the me level is the foundation for having impact on the we's that you're part of, the teams and the organizations and the families and the communities, but then ultimately the world. You just can't take away the me part. You've got to do your work there. And everyone's journey looks really different, and everyone's mode of transport in that journey looks really different, right? So even, mindfulness is one of those things that is kind of neurologically shown to improve performance and empathy and all kinds of things. So I don't think that's super optional, but we do try to mix up, a guided visualization like the brief one that we just did with some physical exercise and activity, with journaling, with encouraging folks to run or walk or cook or pet a cat or whatever it is on their own. We recognize that, the diversity of our classes of people who are uniformly like-minded in their purpose-mindedness and that purpose seeking, but in every other dimension, extremely diverse and varied. And we have total respect and appreciation for that. So yeah. Go ahead, Juanita.
There's something you said earlier, Nell, about just, I forget the exact words you say, but just along the lines of making a difference from where you are. Because I think that is a really big thing that, again, that I took from Inspiring Capital, but also that I really take on now as a coach and a lot of the work that I do, where there are many different ways to have an impact. And I think that's something that was also lost on me after I left Inspiring Capital and like right after the MBA, where it felt like, oh, you said you were going to do social enterprise and then you didn't, and then you sold out and you can't make a difference. It's like, well, hold your horses, right? Like there are a million ways to have an impact. And we each have an impact in different ways. So that actually for me, as I made my transition into coaching, was a really big thing to keep, because this is how I make an impact. So the way that I make an impact, and I often talk about this, like for me, the intersection of business as a force for good. So really the power of business for good, I deeply believe in that. And then the power of coaching for radical and sustainable change. So that's my sweet spot, and that's how I make a difference. I support people that are making those impacts, whether it's in their corporate businesses, whether it's because they're starting something related to education and changing the way that we go about it, whether it's someone that is in a nonprofit, right? Like across the board, I can support leaders in creating those differences. So I can make a difference that way. But if you think about a leader at a big company, they're making a huge difference if they are authentic, vulnerable, kind leaders. They can make a ginormous impact with the people they work with, the services or the products that they provide, with the people that are above and under them, right? Like there's a ripple effect wherever you are. And so I really think that there is a piece of, there isn't just this one way through this one little thing that we make social enterprise mean to make a difference, but there's a million ways. And going back to where you started, Nell, around like purpose and meaning and impact, that connection is that much more important, because then you can get really clear on what, okay, purpose, what is the meaning? The impact can look in many different ways, but you are actually connected to something larger than this little square where you need to fit.
Yeah, so well put. So tell us that moment when the future became now and you decided to leave your job to become a coach.
Yeah, it was interesting because it really was a moment. And I got this email about a job. I got this email offering a job that for me would have been my golden dream CFO path job. Like, that was it. That's what I had been working for. That's what I had been networking for, all of it. And I remember I got the email and I was like, oh, nah. And at that moment, it was like, oh, that's not it anymore. And it's not that it wasn't great or it wasn't a good opportunity. Like, it would have been fine. And it just wasn't what was filling me anymore. Like, it wasn't what I really inside, like, really wanted to do. And at that point, it was like, well, if I don't want that job, if I don't want that, like, amazing opportunity, then I'm not going to stay here either, because it makes no sense. I'm staying here for that. So what's the point? And at that point, I gave my notice and started doing this. And it's been a journey, but I think, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, there's days where it's hard as an entrepreneur, right? Like, I didn't realize this, but becoming a coach is being an entrepreneur. And there's days where it's hard and there's days where you're not sure. And it really, I think part of it is allowing those hard days and allowing the doubt and allowing, like, yeah, I'm human. And sometimes, like, I want some comfort and security that I had before. And then part of it is also reminding, okay, why is it that I'm doing this? What was this for? What had me make this decision? And reminding myself, because it's easy to forget in the face of challenges, in the face of figuring out, again, circumstances, insurance, income, benefits, any of that, right? Like, then it's like, oh, okay, this is why I'm doing this. Okay, let's keep going.
Love that. Yeah. And so obviously folks on the call are a little bit before even a post-grad decision, much less than leaving the post-grad decision to go independent, but to store away for their future selves, what do you wish you knew at that decision point, or would you have stayed longer or left sooner, or were there any signals that you recommend people look for? I mean, that reaction to a job is a pretty good suggestion. I tell people that all the time with recruiting, you know, as we send our fellows back to second year. And I remember so vividly one student was saying, you know, help me through the coaching. I'm a little interview prep, you know, and I'm not a case interview coach by any stretch, but I was helping her think about her interview lines. And she's like, I'm just not sure I'm going to be excited if I get that offer letter. I was like, stop, do not pass go, stop prepping and do something else with your time. So that's a really good one. If you don't think you're going to be excited about the offer letter, it's the wrong spot. But what else should people know or keep in mind?
I think you made me think of one thing that I don't think I mentioned before when you were asking about what people helped me and, like, in terms of all of that. Like, there was one of our organization, okay, OCD, Career Development, Office of Career Development. That was the office at NYU. And there was a person there who was amazing and instrumental in, especially my second year. And I think a lot of what she supported me with was, like, getting clear on what are the things that I want and what were the things that were important to me. Because my second year of recruiting was madness. And I got my job after I graduated. And so it was, I mean, challenging to say the least. And so I think, like, one very tactical thing is really leverage whatever your Office of Career Development is, and think of them as your allies. I think so often, I and a lot of my classmates, we saw them as kind of the service that was offered to us, and they needed to do this or should have done that, or we should have known. And yes, there's gaps, there's opportunities, there's all these things. But if you think of them as your allies and you actually build relationships with them, they actually can be that. And so they can just bring a lot of guidance and a lot of know-how and a lot of supporting you in thinking through things. So don't overlook that office, because it can be a huge asset. And then in terms of yourself, and I think more to your question now of like just signs and what to look for, get very clear on what is important to you. I remember the point of it is like, get very clear on what's important to you, and that starts to serve as a compass. Because as you look at opportunities, as you look at what you're recruiting for, as you look at what your life can be ahead, then you actually have something to almost like measure against. But it's something that is yours. It's not like, oh, let's measure against the salary that I should have for the MBAs because that's what the magazine says. Or, oh, let's measure against the title I should have because that's the title you should have post-MBA, because that means nothing, right? Like, I mean, kind of, but not really.
Right. And if you decide that title and prestige matter to you because of later or because of whatever, then so be it, drill down, but not just because the magazine says, is I think the important
Exactly.
point.
Yeah, exactly. So like if there's something here where like, okay, there's this piece about your financial future, financial stability in order to something that is important to you, then that actually has a different meaning. So just getting clear. Thank you for putting that in now too, because yeah, you're right? Like if there is something in it that matters for you, yes. But if it's because of others, then it's a lose game in the end. And so get clear on that, and then start choosing your options aligned with that thing that is important to you personally.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We have built in over time sort of a work taxonomy, we call it. And, even to the financial point, I think what's interesting is I'm like, if anything, think more about money in the sense, I encourage our MBAs to think about like, what do you want from money, right? Do you want to be in the running for a lottery to become a billionaire? Because that's awesome. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you want to be able to have that level of wealth and influence over hopefully some impact area, because purpose is external. It's not about amassing villas on various tropical islands. But if it's about, wanting to see what Bill Gates has done philanthropically or be in that billionaire's pledge and do it differently for the cause that matters to you, so be it, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to do that, don't go through consulting recruiting, because you're not going to become a billionaire as a consultant. Even if you're CEO of McKinsey, you're not, right? Like the odds don't work out that way. And so if you want to go there, you have to do different things. You have to play the VC game. You have to play these 1 in a million shots, right? But if you do, go play, If, on the other hand, you want to be wealthy in Manhattan and send kids to private school and travel in certain ways and donate and be on boards, okay, that's a different level of wealth, and we can think about where that is. If you're quite happy to be wealthy or, safe and financially free and comfortable in even Indianapolis or off the grid, back home in Colombia or, in some other third place, that's still another order of magnitude compared to Manhattan wealthy, just because life costs more in Manhattan, and so we actually really encourage people like drill down. Don't just want to hit the magazine average. Like that's a horrible way to benchmark your financial goals. To say nothing of the fact that there's obviously a lot beyond the salary that matters, right? Of the flexibility, of the impact you're working toward, of the culture, of the pace. Do you want to be fast and frenetic and doing things on the cutting edge, or do you want to be slow and precise and getting things really right and changing more slowly? Both totally valid ways to make change, but they look and feel really different. So yeah, I think it's a great advice.
Well, actually, and to that point now, because what you made me think about was, okay, just like thinking through those things, right? Like being clear on what is the life that you want, what is it that you want your day-to-day to be like, what is it that you want, like financially, what is it that you want, all of those things. And so, it can be something, that's part of the reason I have a job, like that's a lot of the conversations I have with people, but that's also one of the things that you get to do with your teammates, with your teammates, with your classmates. Right? Because like it may feel very lonely at some point, but you are one going through this experience with a bunch of other people. And so what if you actually created some community or created something around you with people that are going through the same, and you have these conversations and actually support each other through and in these conversations, then you can create entirely new possibilities for you and for them.
And that's that cohort magic, right? That's why we have retained so much of that. You know, when Juanita went through the program, we had 160 hours together over the course of the summer. It was so intense and so rich and such a big fire hose. And now we're down to, 12 to 15 hours over the summer, plus what we've added in the seasons before and after. But we've had to be really intentional about what we leave and what we take. And that cohort time has remained, it's 50% now of our time, versus 10 or 15% in 2014. They were always together, but not peer working. And we've kept that because we know it's so magic, right? And so we have tools and frameworks, and we can kind of give that to you to facilitate the conversations, but the richness and the magic and the learning and the growth happens, you amongst yourselves as peers.
Yeah. And even creating those kind of like cohorts in your quote unquote normal life, right? So creating those cohorts in school, right? Like who are those people that are, and it may be kind of like the people that are in social enterprise or have some sort of interest in impact. It may just be people that are thinking about the next years of their life and they're not set on like this traditional route. So just create your own communities of support.
Yeah. So Juanita, knowing that you work with some MBAs and other folks who are, 5 to 20 or more years out of business school or grad school into career, what do you see as the place for personal development and personal leadership? Like, why does it really matter, down the road in career when rubber hits the road?
I think a lot of it now connects to something we were talking about just before about the benchmark. So I think there's this piece of what is it that you want? What does success mean to you? What is it that you're working towards? What is it that you want your life to be like? Because it gets to a point where without knowing that for yourself, then you're just playing someone else's game. And it may be fine, right? Like it may be fine for a while, it may be fine forever, and you're just like, you won't die from lack of personal development. Like that I don't think. You will have a much, much more fulfilling life in every realm through personal development. So if you think about, I think for me, the biggest thing is relationships, and everywhere, right? Like relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships, friends relationships, work relationships, like all of that can be entirely different when you actually know yourself, when you know who you are, when you are actually grounded in that. Because if you think about it, I think the biggest, I don't know if the biggest, but a big challenge is often making things mean things about us. So for example, okay, now I'm going to make 150,000. So that means that I'm worth it. Well, that's a reason to go for that, but that's never going to really mean that you're worth it. And my guess is that you're still not going to think you're worth it. If you do know that you're worth it, if you have your own thing, if you know who you are, then that's the 150,000 is its own thing. I'm not saying not go for it or yes, go for it, but it actually doesn't mean anything about you. When it comes to relationships and conversations, when it comes to leading teams, it's like, oh, my team didn't achieve the goal. I'm a terrible person. I should have never been here. I am a failure. Well, okay, that actually hinders your ability to lead and create things. And so it's just knowing who you are, really connecting with yourself. And from there, you don't make everything be about you. You don't make everything mean something good or bad about you that you're constantly trying to improve or to fix. You just are and happen to be working with these people. You're that much more open. You're that much more vulnerable. You're even that much more risky in an empowering way, right? Like you'll go for less likely things because you know who you are, because that won't define you. And so when it comes to success, career, I think the rest of your life, well, it's not about others and what others think and what you make numbers and metrics mean. It's about what you want. And so it's an entirely different experience.
And, you know, for us in the context of Inspiring Capital, this is kind of the punchline, that it's that comfort to take informed risks that is going to make business a force for good, that is going to reset capitalism to be more sustainable, more equitable. Because if you don't have the courage to break the status quo and try things differently because you're so wrapped up in how you're seen or hitting those metrics or hitting that, you know, like succeeding or getting the benchmark, nothing's changing around here, and I vote for some change. Like, we need to change some things. And so if we don't have leaders with that level of self-assurance combined with the purpose, combined with the groundedness, and, you know, the ability to separate from ego and try some of these things and do things differently, take risks, it's all for naught, you know. And so that's what that's why we really harp on this element of personal leadership and the growth mindset and all of those things that it takes to take informed risks and make change, along with the fact that, you know, whether you want to be a good person or not, which I really believe is a fundamentally human thing that gets left out of a few percent of the human population. But for the rest of us, that's natural. The current status quo, and this was true even pre-COVID, we just didn't see it as obviously. The risky thing was not to take risks. Like, turns out the status quo has not been working for a long time. And so if your plan was to run through your MBA like your dad did, and yes, I mean your dad and not your mom, and get that job and recruit and then go for 40 years with that company, that was a horribly risky plan. Right? Because that company, chances are, is not going to be around. They're not going to hire you 40 years later. You know, you're not going to be on. And so, you know, whether you want to be part of this new economy and a reset, more equitable capitalism or not, if you simply want to survive as the professionals where you are in your life with 30 to 50 years of earning potential, you can't afford to not have the comfort with those kind of risks that are doing things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what you said about COVID and that really challenging the status quo, that is so, so true. And I think going back to personal development, like, so much of what I experienced and so much of what I heard from people that have been reconnecting through this last month have been just how much this month has been about reconnecting with themselves.
1,000%. 1,000%. It's why it's such interesting times, right? Because it did really throw it in our face. And so a lot of tragedy and sad and hard, but a lot of silver lining of waking people up.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap on that note. Just one final note, as the MBA students, you know, tuned in here are watching, what are final words of wisdom as they think about, you know, why should they add this work of the Inspiring Capital Fellowship to whatever else they're doing in their studies and in their internship?
Yeah, I mean, connecting something I said earlier about you can never have, like, there's no such thing as over support. This is a great example of it. And I was very fortunate to have this when I was going through my MBA and just staying and having the support along this last years. This type of support where it's like more around that purpose, meaning when it's more about mindfulness, that support that is outside of the traditional paths, I don't think many MBAs have it. And I do firmly believe that that would make a huge difference. Again, like for me, a lot of what I do is thinking like, how much of a difference would it have been for me or for my classmates if more of us had these voices of alignment, right? Because in the end, that's what it is. You get to define your purpose, you get to define your meaning, you get to choose all of that, and then you make choices align with that or not, but you're actually aware of it. So informed decisions, choices, connecting with your purpose and your meaning, like, it can make a world of a difference in how you go into your second year and the choices you make after. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap us there. I'll stop the recording and we'll sign off. But Juanita, thank you so much, as always. Such good insight.
Thank you so much.